So, a little bit of background. As Alex said, I'll introduce myself. Let's look at the whole issue of thinking skills. Because the main issue, of course, is that it's part of what we have to do. Of course, Curriculum 2000, the National Curriculum document, states quite clearly, and I have a copy here right in front of me, that we are supposed to incorporate thinking skills throughout the delivery of the curriculum. It says, and I quote, key skills. The following key skills are described as key skills because they help the learners to improve their learning and performance in education, work and life. And then, of course, it talks about thinking skills, page 22. And then it goes on to talk about information processing skills, reasoning skills, decision-making skills, inquiry skills, creative thinking skills, and evaluation and decision-making skills. So it's already in place. A bit of background for you about us, and that is that as a teacher myself, this didn't even come into my life when I was in education. But having worked with businesses became very much oriented towards using thinking skills. So I spent the vast part of my last 20 years working with businesses and doing thinking with them. However, about 12 years ago, it became apparent that this could be useful in education. And so I started to get involved again with education. And it's about 40 or 50% of my time now. So this has become a growing part, especially since Curriculum 2000. So that's the kind of background. If you like to think of it as a way of blending what we do already with the thinking skills, that's the best way of looking at it, integrating it into the curriculum. So this is in itself a way of helping our children to think about their learning and think about thinking. So let's make a start. I suppose it might be good to set out the methodology first of all. So let's go to the methodology. I'd like to start by kind of sowing the seeds in your mind, and then we'll have a go practically straight away on using a thinking technique. But let's look at the methodology for one moment. If we think about our students, our children, and that their role as a thinker, then it's in a way similar to the role of a driver of a car. The driver of a car has to do two things. One is to harness the horsepower of the car and then to maneuver the car in such a way as to achieve what they want to achieve. And in a way, a thinker is doing very much the same thing. So, thinking is a mind operating, not vehicle operating skill. I can choose to think in a particular way. I can choose to direct my thinking in a particular direction. And so, like the car, I can steer it. Similarly, I also have a horsepower, an innate potential of my mind. So I have to use that. Now, we all know that some people drive a vehicle with maybe far too much power in a maybe reckless way, or other people who are really, children like this are very smart. They use the available horsepower they've got and they think smarter. So it's about manoeuvring our mind. Now, in terms of describing this, we have two ways in which we already work with thinking skills, because I see literacy and numeracy as two existing things that do help us to manage our minds. But there is a third one, and the third one is operacy, and I realise that this is a new word. The word operacy came about by accident, in a sense, because it's not an official term, but it has been coined as a way of describing managing thinking about doing. So if, as an example, a student, a child, is asked to think about something and make a choice or make a decision, then they may be managing their thinking about doing something. So let's take two examples. One is, let's say a year 3 or a year 4 child who is offered the choice of, would you like salad or chips with that? They have to weigh up what they fancy, what might be good for them, what might not be good for them, whether they're hungry enough for one, or whether they only want that, or whatever it is, or whether they like what it looks like. They're weighing up the options. Now, a bit later on, year 12s, year 13s, they're leaving school, or they're having to make decisions about examinations. Do I stay on? Do I do a certificate? Do I do a diploma? Do I do this? Do I do that? They're making decisions as well. That's what I see as operacy. It's managing thinking about doing, making a choice, making a decision, looking at the options, Because we're using our mind and we're directing it to say, well, what else can I do? How else can we do it? Oh, now a couple of things about thinking, first of all, before we have a go. Let's have a little look at what I see, and this is not an official, but my way of looking at the way in which the brain and thinking happens. First of all, there is a link, but not a direct link, between intelligence and thinking. They're not the same. I have met some very intelligent people who are pretty narrow thinkers, and conversely, I've met some particularly streetwise people that don't proclaim to be brilliant thinkers, and they become very smart. So therefore there is a link. What we're trying to do is to give the best possible option to both kinds of thinking. We want to encourage people who are narrow in their thinking to be broader, and those that are very broad in their thinking to be able to focus on one particular thing. Thinking usually follows feeling. This is another one that probably occurs to you now if I say it, that many, many times we react on our feelings and afterwards maybe are concerned that that wasn't appropriate, we may regret it, or conversely, we may say, I did just the right thing, I'm glad I did that. But whatever it is, it's fairly simple to say that thinking and feeling are linked, but often feeling precedes thinking. Our brain instinctively reacts to something. So what we're sometimes needing to do with a child, for example, is to get them to think before they act. So therefore, instead of just reacting, why did you push so-and-so, it's sometimes important to say, let's think about what happens when so-and-so annoys you, and let's see if we can do other than react. So those are the kind of things that I see as being a link between thinking and feeling, but necessarily we sometimes feel first. Thinking is also a deliberate exploration. And I think back now to my days at school, my maths teacher, Mr. Brookfield, used to shout the word think at me in the hope, the vain hope I have to say, that it would help me. Now, what am I saying here? So thinking is a deliberate exploration. It doesn't matter how he exhorted me to think. It was just impossible. He would say, come on, Nigel, think, 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 boy, think. And every time I remember that, I used to think, what happened? Nothing. He didn't give me any help. He didn't say, how can we think about this? So it's very much a deliberate thing. I engage with the other person and I say, well, what are we trying to think about? How could we think about that in a particular way? Or how could we think differently? And of course, we know, as teachers, we do that every day. We're trying to get children to think deliberately, to think about whatever it is they're doing, saying, writing, feeling. The next one is a little bit more concerning, and that is that there seems to be, out there in the big wide world, a conception or perception that people are creative or not creative, that there's a switch, or that you're either born creative or not. That really isn't the case. Let me just give you an example. Some of these sessions that I do involve me going off to schools and doing evening class sessions with the parents. Their children have been doing thinking skills and they come along to a parent consultation, and during the consultation there's a session from me to explain what all these thinking tools are all about. And they're told on the agenda that they'll be required to do some creative thinking. And without exception, every session I've done, parents have come up to me at the beginning of the session and said, Nigel, before we go any further, I'd like you to know I'm not creative. And I say, it's okay. And no, they say, no, I'm not creative, you know, I do this for a living and I'm not creative. And I say, well, we'll see about that. And without fail, during the evening session, they come up with ideas that surprise them. Why? Because we use thinking techniques to help people to think new things. So everyone in my mind, every child, every person, every individual can think new things. They can actually come up with new ideas. They're locked up inside our heads, and it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. If you think you can or you think you can't, either way you're right. But people say, I can't be creative. Yes, you can. Everyone can. Using thinking skills will help us. It opens doors. Okay, you may also want to consider the penultimate one there. We need to utilise all the brain's resources. Our children have wonderful lives. They read, they see, they play games, they talk, there's experiences in the family, they have lots of things happening to them. They see things that are all in their memory. We have total memory, but we don't have total recall. One of the things we can do with thinking skills is to tap into that rich resource and get them to use what's happening in their minds. And we ask them to reveal things. As you all know, their imagination is wonderful. Far better than ours in a sense, because we've become accustomed with adulthood to the baggage. But we watch children and they say, well, what about doing this? And what about doing that? And how about this? And they write stories and they think of things, names of places that just fascinate us. So we're trying to utilise all the brain's resources, whether it's left or right brain thinking. It's about harnessing the whole brain and the experience. And the final one, of course, relates to Gardner. Howard Gardner, multiple intelligences. I did a gifted and talented conference a little while ago in Northamptonshire, and one teacher said something which has stuck with me. And that is, she said that all children are gifted and talented. There shouldn't be a gifted and talented unit. All children have a gift, somewhere hidden below them. Not because she said so, but because the evidence from Gardner's work is that we all have intelligences, notice how it's written, which we don't know about. Maybe there is something inside each of us that we haven't yet tapped into. I believe thinking skills will help us to reveal that. And I hope to show that during the day. So if it's imagination, if it's design, if it's a kinesthetic intelligence, if it's about imaginative intelligence, if it's about creative intelligence, it'll be there somewhere hidden below the surface. And we'll amaze ourselves and our children because suddenly they'll say, wow, I've just come up with this incredible idea. Or I've just seen something in a different way. And in a moment I'm going to ask you to have a go at that. So I want you to see what can happen with just using a very simple thinking tool. So that's it really, the background to thinking. Let's have a little look at what's going to happen. We've got one thing to work with, of course, which is the human brain. Now, if we look at the brain, there is the most wonderful part of the brain. The excellence of the brain derives from its ability to make patterns. We don't have to keep reinventing the world every day because we get up, we put our clothes on, we make coffee or tea or refreshments or cut sandwiches or walk to school or drive to school. We read, we write, we recognise our friends. All of these things are mainstream patterns in our mind. Let me give you an example, okay? I'm going to try to describe something to you and then show you how our brain sort of takes a shortcut, okay? Let me describe it first of all and see if you can get it and see what happens. Okay, it's got windows. It's got doors. There are cupboards inside. There's a bedroom. It's got a roof. It's got walls. If I showed you a picture of it, you'd know what it looked like. It has wheels. Oh, now it's getting a bit more. Right, but it has no engine. Yeah, word is caravan, isn't it? You see, the brain keeps caravan. So I don't have to go through that protracted description every time. Someone said, oh, where did you go for your holiday or something? You say, well, I went in a thing with windows and doors and it had cupboards inside and a roof. That would be the long-handed way, and life would be very tedious. The brain says, I'll tell you what, I'll give you a word, it tells you, caravan. And you go, oh, caravanning, right, understood. And it happens with the same thing with table, chair, friend, people, love, hate, weather, rain. They're all little shorthand ways of describing things. So the brain puts together these patterns. Now, there is the other side to it. Our children and us, we will all have those patterns. And those patterns form our perceptions. So, I'm going to now take you on a little trick. Rather than give you the description, I'm going to give you the word. And I want you to imagine it in your mind. So, we're going to see how the perception is used to see ideas and make a decision. Here we go. I want you to imagine a key. I want you to imagine it in your mind's eye. What's it made of, that key? How big is it, that key? Could you draw it, that key? Where is the key? What does it do? You could probably now tell me, except I wanted to just add something to help you. Because how many of you have a key made of stone? How many of you have a key spelt with a Q? How many of you have ships tied up to your key? So Unfortunately, I've kind of reversed the odds now. Instead of telling you all the detail and expecting you to guess caravan, I've given you a piece of information, but your perception went to key. I would say most of you, am I right in thinking you were opening doors with yours? Yeah, I've been there before. Someone did that to me, and then they said, the ship is tied up against the key, and I went, ooh, that hurt, because you suddenly switched all my thinking. So, we see ideas using the existing perception. So if the noise key, that's the word I'm making, triggered the word in your mind, because of the insufficient information I didn't specify, you maybe made an assumption or drew a conclusion. Let's have a look at how that happens. Because the brain does something for us. It makes sense of everything that happens around us. You may have seen this piece of writing before, but according to the research at Cambridge, you see, it kind of flies in the face of literacy, doesn't it, in a way? Yeah. You don't need to teach people to spell, just write the approximate word. The brain will sort the rest out. No, of course not. But nevertheless, that shows the brain will sort out everything for us. But it will jump to conclusions. It will make assumptions on our behalf to save us having to do it every day. So if the word is slightly wrong, then it will simply make it right, interpret it for us. Now, of course, that's just in word. Let's do picture. What do you see here? Because maybe you see a picture of an old lady, a young lady. Maybe you see, apparently there is a horse's head, or a picture of the head of a horse there as well. The point is, there are a number of different images. The same here. You may see a skull. You may not. You may see a lady looking into a mirror. You may see a sailing boat. You may see some bottles. I don't know what you see, and I can't tell you what to see. You may see a face. You may see someone playing a musical instrument. You may see a rabbit, or you may not. It may be a duck. There are, of course, thousands of these. That's why people, individuals, what were those things called? Magic eye pictures? They're there because they play on our perceptions. And of course, even more down to earth, every comedian and storyteller takes you on a little journey. Every comedian or storyteller takes you on a journey and then snaps you at the end with the punchline. You're not expecting it. So unfortunately, the brain will take its own course. Let me give you an example. A very simple story. So I'm now going to tell you a story. I'm going to take you as a storyteller down a little pathway. A young boy, right back at the beginning of the 19th century, went to America to seek his fortune. He left his little island of Ireland and he went to seek his fortune. He left a village, a tiny little village tucked away in the hills. And he left a family of other brothers and sisters, mother, father, uncles and aunts. Close-knit family in Ireland somewhere. And he wrote back after a few months, said, I'm working in New York, I'm washing, cleaning tables, I'm making some money, I'm saving. And then a few months later, he said, I'm moving to a hotel, I'm going to be now a concierge, I'm going to be a bellboy, I'm going to be looking after people's luggage and getting bigger tips. And then a bit later on, he was promoted and he was made an assistant in one of the departments of a bigger hotel. And so it went on. And then he left and he went to work on a farm. And he decided that farming was for him. He's now 10, 15 years into his world of America, and he decides he's going to be a farmer. So he saves up money and he buys a small holding in somewhere on the east coast of America. And then gradually he saves enough money and he goes west. He goes to the Midwest. He goes to the corn belt, the prairie lands of the Midwest, and he buys some land for himself. And he writes back home and he sends a photo of his first purchase, his farm building with some land. Are you with me? You can picture the scene. Finally, after 25 years, a family, a big farm, all the prosperity he wants, he goes back to Ireland. He's now in his 50s and they've got a family. He takes the family back. He meets his brothers and sisters. After 30, 40 years. And the question is, from one of his brothers, how big is your farm? And he said, well, it's very big. Look, here's a photo. But photos never do the horizon justice. So he says to his brother, it's very big. And his brother says, how many acres or how many miles round is your farm? He said, oh, it's huge. He said, I can't measure it. He said, well, is it like here? Is it like up onto the hill? And he said, no, it's bigger than that. He said, is it like here to the other side of the town? He said, no, it's bigger than that. And then in an effort to explain to his brother how big it is in the Midwest, he said to his brother, look, if I got in my truck and I tried to drive all the way around my farm, it would take me 2 days. And suddenly his brother's face lit up and he said, aha, I had a truck like that once, and a blooming nuisance it was too.